Hello, 7th grade history. It's Mr. Burns, and we are going to filming a video here on the Cold War vocabulary. You'll notice at the top of your document, you do have a reading and a couple questions here as kind of an introduction before the vocab. It's a little bit different this time, and you are required to do that. So read this and answer these 5 short questions. They're pretty much short answers. They don't need to be written in full sentences. You can do bulleted lists if you want. And then after that, you'll see that you have your vocab with 15 words, but you'll notice you only have to do 13 of them because we already did dictatorship and we already did communism in the previous unit. So you are responsible for understanding those terms, but you do not have to complete the 2 columns to the right. So you only have to do 13 words and these 5 questions. I'm going to give you 2 free points to make it an even 20. All right, so let's look at the vocab here. And the first word is Cold War, and the Cold War is gonna form after World War II. And when it forms, it's the United States being the dominant superpower, which we'll talk about next, and in the Western hemisphere, in the Western Europe, along with Great Britain and France and some of our other allies. And then the East, it's going to be the Soviet Union, and it's going to be this tension. There is some fighting, but not really direct fighting between the U.S. and the Soviet Union during this time period. And most of the world, it takes one side or the other. Okay, superpower is your second vocab word. And that is, examples of this would be the United States during the Cold War or the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And this, these superpowers are going to kind of run foreign policy and how our global interactions exist from the post-World War II era, the 40s, all the way through to the early 1990s. Okay, so that's a superpower. We already talked about dictatorship last unit, and you can see here's the definition with an example there. Make sure you're creating your own unique pictures that you do not see in this video. Democracy is our next one. That's kind of the opposition of dictatorship. It's a political system in which the people have the power. That's literally what democracy means. Demo means people, and cracy means rule or government. So people have the power to pick people to represent them in our representative democracy that we have in the United States, and we do that through voting. And then those people serve terms and they represent their constituents, who are the people that live in their district or their state. Communism, again, another word that was already in the previous unit. Just to review, communism is an economic system where it's basically a single political party, but basically what happens is private property is eliminated. The government or the political party, the Communist Party, controls the means of production and resources in that government. All right. Capitalism is where individual or private individuals or businesses own the means of production, and you're allowed to open up a business and make profit for yourself. And workers get paid according to how hard they work and their skill level and talents and so on, instead of being distributed by the government. You get to earn your own income and kind of pursue your own way of life in the capitalist economy. All right, the next word is containment. You can see the root word of contain there, and this is the policy where the U.S. is going to try to prevent the spread of communism. So we're going to try to contain communism, keep it where it is, and not let it spread. We're going to have some successes and some failures during this time period of the Cold War in the 50s through the 80s. We're eventually coming out with some communist nations, and it spread a little bit, but we were able to contain it for the most part. The domino theory is the theory. It's similar to containment, but it's more of a theoretical belief that once one nation comes under communist control, neighboring countries will also come under communist control. They'll continue their push to spread communism. So what does the United States want to do? We want to intervene and get involved in some affairs like in Korea and like in Cuba and like in Vietnam, and hopefully prevent the spread of communism further. All right, the Iron Curtain is an imaginary barrier that separated kind of the Eastern Bloc or the Soviet Bloc the communist nations, where Soviet Union had a lot of influence over these satellite nations that we'll talk about next, and then the West, which is democracy, which is your Western Germany, France, Spain at this point, and Great Britain, and so on. All right, satellite nations are those that, again, they're technically independent, but they're really forced to rely on a larger nation that if they don't have that larger nation for economic and political reasons, that they are going to fail and struggle. So you can see here that, Poland and Czechoslovakia and Eastern Germany and Romania and so on were all part of the Soviet bloc of nations in Eastern Europe. The arms race, this is a really good image here that shows, an example of a symbol of the United States and the Soviet Union competing to build up their respective armed forces and supply of nuclear weapons during the Cold War. Arms race. When you see the word arms in politics or in government, it usually means weapons. The space race was another competition that was kind of an underlying part of the Cold War, where the United States and Soviet Union competed to get to space. And Sputnik was the first satellite put up in space by the Soviets in 1957. And, then the U.S. beats the Soviets to the moon. Like, it was just this competition to try to land a man on the moon and discover more things about space and just gain that control that the superpowers were looking for. We hopefully will get to these last few words during class. We might not, but the baby boom era is the era after the World War II from 1946 to 64, where the birth rate increased dramatically. You hear people called baby boomers, or you guys might just call them boomers. These are people born between 46 and 64. Both of my parents are baby boomers. And many of your, maybe not your parents as much, but maybe your grandparents were probably baby boomers. The GI Bill of Rights was signed in 1944 during the war, and it would come to benefit a lot of World War II veterans. There's still the GI Bill that people who are enlisted in the military can use educational grants and stipends for themselves, for their children. And it really got our veterans into the workforce, and these were some of our leaders into the 50s and 60s that would lead our nation. The last word is globalization, which is kind of taking things from a more like local or national scale to a more international and global scale, and how our economy is reliant on other nations at this point instead of just on our contained to ourselves. So that's globalization. All right. I would like you to complete this by the posted due date, and this is probably going to be our last set of vocab for the school year. So have a great day. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you for watching.